I have a partner in crime today. He is the co-founder of the League Champ app, co-founder of Two Guys, One Pod, and a fantasy football podcast, co-host of the FF Dynasty, and a colleague and fantasy analyst of mine at Player Profiler. It is Chev, and you can find him at Chev90 on Twitter. Chev, what's going on, baby?
Man, you know me. Any day on this side of dirt's a good one, brother.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. How are things going with you? What tell I'm gonna give you a chance and then I'll remind you later, but what do you have going on? What are you working on at the moment?
I just working on the player profiler, working with Jeremiah over at Player Profiler on the draft guide. Over on the FF Dynasty, we're actually launching a redraft channel that'll come out. We're doing some mocks over there right now, and we'll launch that channel in probably mid to late July. And other than that, just writing articles and being way too degenerate about fantasy football in June. So uh that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, we've talked about it. It's one of those things where it's a dry season. Mini camp is starting to close out and right, and then obviously training camp is coming up. But it's starting to get there, right? We've put the time in, right? The draft is over, free agency's done, and we're kind of getting ready to now finally transition to training camp. We start getting more news, like everything starts to kind of hit all at once.
Right.
But I'm excited for it, and we have a good show lined up today. We both put together a decent list of breakout candidates at the wide receiver position. The first guy that we're going to talk today is one of your guys. It's Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions. Currently, Jameson Williams right now on Underdog is going as wide receiver 24, and he's going at an ADP of 43, just in the middle of the fourth/fifth round. Jameson Williams, tell me why you picked him as one of your breakouts, Chev.
So we got to see Jameson Williams in what we pretend to be a full-time, like we all assumed it was like full-time role. So he was 38th in routes run with 442 routes last year, but that turned into 90 targets, 58 catches, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 11 for 60, and another touchdown on the ground. This is Tyreek Hill redo, in my opinion. So like we're just getting to see an elite player in an elite offense finally get a full-time role, and then he tells you that he's awesome at football, and so you need to believe that he's awesome at football. So he's just, like I said, 38th in routes run, yards per target. He was third amongst wide receivers with at least 75 targets at 11.12 yards per target, 7.45 yards after the catch per reception. That was third in the league. And then he was third in plays of 50 plus yards catches, and then fourth in 40 plus yard catch, or second in 40 plus yard catches. Sorry, I'm fumbling through that, but that was off the top of the dome. But
That's all right.
I really think that we follow the breadcrumbs to a guy who's going at wide receiver 24 on Underdog, and he could very well finish in the top 10, maybe top 5, with the type of efficiency he has, and just a small step forward in terms of targets, going from 90 to 115, 120. I mean, he's a guy that can score from anywhere. You saw that against the Bears last year. So this I feel like this is we got the mini breakout, but he could continue to break out and go from 14 points a game to 18 or 19 points a game without a massive target share. And that's one of the most rare pieces of fantasy that you can get.
Yeah, the thing with Jameson Williams too to keep in mind, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown did have some knee cleanup, I guess, this offseason. Maybe that affects him. I'm still buying Amon-Ra St. Brown, but if there's a possibility that does affect him, right? There's maybe a world where Jameson Williams steps up, right, and has a really good year. I think when you look at Jameson Williams right now, like we said, going at wide receiver 24, guys around him at the wide receiver position, DK Metcalf, Travis Hunter, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton. You think of Devonta Smith and Jameson Williams, both wide receiver 2s on their teams. I think Devonta Smith, in my opinion, could probably be the wide receiver 1 on a handful of teams.
Fully agree.
What do you say? Same there.
I said fully agree.
Yeah, I think Jamo. I don't think I'm there yet with Jamo. I think he still needs a little bit of room to grow. But if he can continue to stack on these good years that he's had, I could definitely see a world where he could also be a top 32 wide receiver in the NFL. I guess my question to you would be the wide receivers going around him, like I said, DK Metcalf, Travis Hunter, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton. Are there any of those wide receivers that you're taking over Jameson Williams this year if you are drafting in redraft?
If I'm drafting a redraft, I would you you want to assume that you can bank on the volume of DK Metcalf, but we've never seen an Arthur Smith offense with a receiver get more than 117 targets. Now you think that Aaron Rodgers is going to change that philosophy, but these are the facts. Like 117 targets is the high watermark. Arthur Smith likes to run the ball a ton. And, obviously there's going to be some sort of meeting of the minds. But the only guy that I would consider taking over them, so DK Metcalf, no. Cortland Sutton.
Mm,
Cortland Sutton would be the one. I mean, it's an ascending offense. We saw him finally hit 1,000 yards for the first time since 2019, but he's got reliable quarterback play. We know that he's a red zone weapon, but he's a big guy that can move. So those 130 targets could become more valuable, more consistent, if you will, than Jameson Williams. No, you're signing up for the volatility because it's not volume, right?
sure.
So yeah, it's a toss up. It would be a toss up if I'm doing 50 best ball drafts. I'd probably draft 25 Cortland Sutton, 25, Jameson Williams.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not there on Travis Hunter. I would take JMO. I would still take JMO over DK maybe. Some even in redraft, sometimes you'll split the exposure. I do have concerns about DK Metcalf, right? The contested catch rate was really bad last year. Will say that Aaron Rodgers does tend to funnel to one wide receiver, and there's really no competition there. So the targets
Yeah.
should be there for Metcalf. It's really a matter of the quality of the targets. And he's definitely not Devontae Adams, who we did see
Right.
get a ton of targets from Rodgers last year. Cortland Sutton's interesting. I would say, Sutton did have 10 touchdowns in 2023 after a quote unquote career year last year with 8 touchdowns. He actually went down in touchdowns, right? So he wasn't ballooned by like all these touchdowns that he scored. So I do think there's a world where Sutton can get better than he did last year in
Exactly.
an ascending offense. And there's not really a ton of targets around him. Now, one other thing from a dynasty perspective, there are, you know, Jameson Williams, when you think about dynasty, right? You're obviously age is always a pretty large factor. And Jameson Williams, when I look at where he's going currently in dynasty, it's wide receiver 30. It's next to guys. Jalen Waddle's going ahead of him. DK Metcalf's going ahead of him. Amika Egbuka is going ahead of him. I think I would take Jameson Williams over Waddle, over Metcalf. I think I'd still take Egbuka, but I'm also extremely high on Egbuka. But I'm also banking on just like I think Egbuka has a really strong future there with Tampa Bay, and I think the veterans are kind of aging out, and there's a possibility that he ends up producing quicker than people expect. Out of those wide receivers, are you taking Jameson Williams over all of them in Dynasty as well?
I'm right there with you with Igbuka, but I would be comfortable taking Jameson Williams over Ibuka.
Okay.
I think there's a path. Like Ibuka was my wide receiver 2 in this class. My rankings would be wild. But I think I would take Jameson Williams right now for production right now, understanding that Amika Ibuka could very well be 17 to 18 points a game as the target to own in that Tampa Bay wide receiver room in just 1 year. So you
Yeah.
you got to be okay with that. But I think that a bet on either one of those offenses is fantastic to me.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Baker's still going to be there. Like
well, Baker's going to be there, right? And they did promote from within, which is encouraging.
right.
And both offenses did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, and the only concern I would have is just with Ben Johnson gone, right? How much, promotion from within. The Bucks have promoted. Bowles has shown he can promote from within at the OC position, right?
Sure.
Where It's been successful. We haven't seen it with Dan Campbell just yet. So
Mhm.
that's more of my concern from an OC standpoint. But I'm with you. The last thing I would say to close this thing out is Jamison Williams. When when you think about Jamison Williams, do you think the suspension, right, and the slow start in his career, he's not like a regular, we have to look at everything in a vacuum, right? And understand that, he did miss some time with the suspension, right?
Sure.
And this offense wasn't what it is today when he was initially drafted there.
Right.
Um, how much stock do you put in that? I think I want to say Jamison Williams is currently is it year 3 for Jamison Williams or is it
No,
year
this is
4?
year 4, and they already activated his 5th-year option.
Right, so he technically misses that quote unquote year 3 breakout, right? And but this is a guy that's still 24 years old, and so and was a top 15 pick.
Right.
So I mean, I'm pretty in on Jamison Williams as well. I guess let's transition to the next player. Next guy we're going to talk about is Rome Odunze, who is my player that I selected. And Rome Odunze right now, wide receiver 33 off the board, an ADP of 61. So he's an early 6th round pick right now on Underdog. And when you think about Rome Odunze last season, 101 targets, 54 receptions for 734 yards, 3 touchdowns. Rome Odunze had 13.6 yards per catch last year, which was 20th among wide receivers that had 700 snaps last season. He did split targets alongside Keenan Allen with 121 and DJ Moore, who had 140. They do get an offensive coordinator upgrade slash head coach upgrade with Ben Johnson.
Mhm.
Rome Odunze, and I can get into a little bit more, dive a little bit deeper, but what are your expectations for Rome Odunze? It's a year 2 for him, so it's not that year 3 breakout, but we are seeing wide receivers start to break out onto the scene a little bit earlier than they used to with those year 3 breakouts. Rome Odunze at this cost right now of a 6th round pick. Are you in at that cost? And do you have faith? Am I in the breakout, or are you thinking that this is just another year where we're pumping up the Bears to have a really good offseason where maybe it comes up a little short?
I think that this is one of those pivot points in 2025 fantasy. So the people that nail this pick one way or the other, if you fade him, if you're all in on the talent, which I'm all in on the talent, I think that it makes it a little bit more like I think that you're looking for signs that he's going to break out, and we don't have anything to go off of other than he's getting an upgraded situation and he's going to have presumably more of a target share. Now, I don't know. I can't make that. I can't confidently say that he's gonna take this massive step forward, but I do think that he's shown us enough to show that he can. And
Sure.
so right now, pick 61. Like let's talk about some guys that are going in that range, right? Like 61. Let me get back up here.
Sure.
But pick 61. I think that
Yeah, you have Jordan Addison, you have Jawan Jennings, and Chris Godwin. Those are the 3 receivers that go behind him. And then you have Calvin Ridley, who's one of your guys, who actually
mhm,
goes the wide receiver ahead of him.
yeah, I think that I would take those bets. I would take those bets over Rome
Mm,
from a safety perspective. Just like, hey, I want to secure some points in my lineup. If my lineup's constructed a little bit differently and I want to, I'm heavy at like I'm light at wide receiver, then I'm still gonna go in a different direction. Like I can't take the shot on Rome at the current cost and where he's going. I do believe in the talent from a dynasty perspective, but there's not enough to tell me like there's not enough. I can't take a step forward from 100 targets. Like
sure.
we think that they drafted Colston. We they drafted Colston Loveland, 10th overall, and then they drafted Luther Burden. And no matter what you think, those guys are going to command some targets. I don't think that they take Rome Odunze off the field, but I just think it limits what we can expect. And he could be extremely efficient because again, I'm in on the talent. I just don't think the situation allows for me to take him over some of those guys that you named in that range.
Yeah, when I think about the guys in that range, I mean, I will say I prefer Calvin Ridley over Rome. Oh, that's Rashee Rice. I prefer Calvin Ridley over Rome at this cost, right? Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 32, pick 56 off the board. Rome, wide receiver 33, pick 61 off the board. I do prefer Calvin Ridley over Rome Odunze, but I would take Rome over Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings, and Chris Godwin.
Oh
I get
wow.
nervous. I get nervous about Godwin, just slow start. They haven't committed that he's going to be back at the start of the season. There's a chance he goes on the
Sure.
pup, right? Like that's a real possibility. Juwan Jennings, while he's looked good. I think you have Christian McCaffrey coming back. You still have George Kittle, who's still playing really well, and I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be a guy, and
That's a good
and
point.
Ayuk is coming back, but I think Jennings goes ahead of Ricky Pearsall, and spoiler alert, we are going to talk about Ricky Pearsall at some point. The one guy I think I could consider taking over Rome is Chris Olave. Now, if we didn't have concerns about Chris Olave and the health, Chris Olave is going way well ahead of all these guys that we named, but it's
Yeah.
about the risk. Are you comfortable taking that risk? If I draft two stud wide receivers early in a draft, I'm comfortable taking a chance on Olave because if I swing and miss, like I still have two amazing wide receivers at the 1 and 2, right? So I think there's a chance I would take Olave over Rome. I probably would take Olave over Rome, but I like Jordan Addison. I'm still taking Rome over him. I kind of said
That's
the case
interesting.
about Godwin. What'd you say?
I said that one's interesting to me. We
Yeah.
can get into that one a little bit more.
Yeah, well, go for it. I mean, are you a big Jordan Addison fan? Are you expecting him to break out or just be better than Rome this year, or is it
So
just the offense is just better?
it's the offense. I know where he is in the pecking order, and I know that the offense lends itself to fantasy points.
Sure.
And so if I have fewer questions, like I said, if I had fewer questions about what we can assume that Rome is going to do, like I don't have to assume what Jordan Addison's going to do. I know that he's been extremely fortunate from a touchdown perspective, but I mean, once is an accident, twice is a trend. I'm kidding, but he's going to see 100 targets. The only question is whether or not JJ McCarthy's good. We know
Sure.
Jordan Addison is good. I feel like you said with Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison can be a one on a lot of teams. I
Okay.
assume Rome could be a one on a lot of teams, but I've seen enough from Jordan Addison to say, okay, well, if I give him 12 targets, this is gonna be real good.
Sure. Yeah, I like Jordan Addison. There are certain spots where I am buying into Jordan Addison. Yeah, I guess it would depend. In this scenario with Rome, Rome is probably similar to Olave, where I'm not comfortable with Rome being my wide receiver 2, but I can take a chance on him as my wide receiver 3, especially if I have two studs at my wide receiver 1 and 2. With Addison, you probably getting a safer player. But I think Rome provides more upside just because I think they're going to be in more passing situations. I like Aaron Jones. I like that offensive line. I do think they're going to run the football more than people expect. And I think the Bears are going to be playing from behind a lot. They have a really bad defense. They were in the top half of the league for points given up last year. I don't think their defense got much better. And then you factor in Keenan Allen, right? Departure of him with the vacated targets, it's 121. Rome had 100 last year next to two other guys, two veterans that had 100 plus. I also think that play calling was really bad last year. I expect Ben Johnson to be a big improvement there. And yeah, they did bring in Luther Burden. They brought in Colston Loveland. But I think those guys might take some time to ramp up, right? I mean, Luther Burden right now currently is dealing with the soft tissue injury. He's missing out on
Yes.
valuable reps right now. And they also Ben Johnson likes to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, right? That's what he did with the Lions a ton. So there could be a lot of situations where Luther Burden might only see himself on the field 50% of the time. And Rome and DJ are kind of dominating that with Loveland and Cole Kmet. I think Loveland at the same time, I'm not worried about Loveland eating it to Rome. I'm more worried about Loveland and Kmet and just Loveland in general, just like how long is it if he misses camp, parts of camp, which they said is a possibility. That's really more my concern about Loveland, but I'm not worried about Loveland from Rome's perspective. Um, and
Sure.
and I would say too, Odunze and DJ are getting valuable reps with Caleb, building on a second year with him. And an interesting thing I noticed too, Rome was 10th in red zone targets last year at the wide receiver position, which was a pretty interesting stat that I didn't know until we prepped for this show. But I thought that
Mhm.
was pretty interesting. I don't really see him as a guy that's a red zone guy, and we'll see how Ben Johnson likes to utilize. And the play calling is going to be different, but I did think that was kind of interesting that he was there was a lot of shots for him in the red zone.
Yeah. So that's really cool because he only had 59 catchable targets and he had 54 catches last year. It
Yeah,
was their deep ball accuracy was comically bad. It was almost as bad as Mahomes and Worthy, like on
yeah,
passes that traveled 20 plus air yards. So I'm a big believer in the talent, and I could craft an argument with you. I mean, I'm not against you by any stretch of the imagination about where they just get to league average
sure,
completion percentage on deep passes, and Rome is 1,000 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns. Like him already having red zone prowess, I guess. I mean, it didn't turn up, but the fact that they're using him in that manner tells you that that's within his skill set. We've seen him do it enough. They've seen him do it enough in practice to say, "Hey, this is a thing that we can do with you." So, I by all stretches of the imagination, I'm out on the ADP, but I'm in on the talent.
sure. Yeah, and I don't mind taking chances on guys that people feel are safer at the ADP. An
Yeah.
interesting note that I would also add is, and then we can move on to the next guy with Rome and Caleb Williams last year. They were 28th in game script, meaning they were the fourth ranked team when it came to playing from behind. So I expect that to continue. Now I don't expect Caleb to be number 7 in pass attempts again. He threw the ball a ton last year. But I also think it's interesting. Red zone attempts, Caleb was 11th in red zone attempts last year, and I don't think this running game got significantly better. They didn't really
Right.
add to that room, so
No,
we'll
not
see.
at all.
No. So we'll see. But let's move on to the next player. It's one of your guys. It's Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. Wide receiver 12 right now with an ADP of 23.5. This is a guy going at the 2-3 turn. Extremely expensive, but similar to Rome. You're talking about Rome that you're in on the player, but you're not necessarily in on the price. That's kind of how I feel with Rashee Rice, where I'm in on him as a player, but the price is just a little high for me. Talk to me about Rashee Rice, why you picked him as a breakout.
So it's been a little rough for me to shift gears from. I think we talked a little best ball before the show. I'm like 6 drafts in, and those are like rookie numbers to
Sure.
some real sickos. So it's been tough for me to shift from dynasty mode and where Rashee Rice is going in dynasty versus where he's going in underdog ADP. But
Sure.
I'm in on the talent completely. Like I've seen enough of Rashee Rice be good at American tackle football to realize he's good at American tackle football.
Sure.
So I mean, in dynasty, he's going like FFD ADP, he's going at the 311. And so at those prices where, I'm all in. But at the 1-2, like basically the 2-3 turn, he's wide receiver 17 in our ADP. So at the 1-2, like at the 2-3 turn, though, I keep saying 1-2. The 2-3 turn, that's a bit rich for my blood. And but here's some really cool stuff about Rashee Rice to support the fact that he's really good at football. So in 2023 weeks 11 to 17, he averaged 8 targets, 6 catches, 86 yards a game. Like that pace is outstanding. It would have smashed Puka Nakua's rookie record season and been 115, 1468, 9 touchdowns. So then he comes out this year and he's 27 targets, 24 catches, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he's showing you that he's an incredible football player. And Mahomes has given him this low A dot role where he just runs after the catch. And I mean, he led the league in yards after catch per reception last year on those 24 receptions. So, and he was averaging 21.2 points a game in those 3 healthy games
Sure.
with no end zone targets. And so the monstrous potential of this role, this low A dot role, he's essentially taken over what Travis Kelce became in that offense. And I think that this ADP is very aggressive because he could be, you could be paying for ceiling, but he was third in points per game through 3 weeks last year. We saw Chris Godwin get used in the slot and put up a wide receiver 2 season. I think we were on pace and on track for something like that, with Chris Godwin being awesome as well. But we were on pace for that, and then it got interrupted by Patrick Mahomes torpedoing his knee.
Yeah. You bring up a good point when you talk about Kelsey and you talk about the A dot. And when I think about, Rashee Rice, I think about a guy that can really work like the middle of the field, right? Not necessarily a field stretcher, a guy that's catching a bunch of deep balls, but he's a guy that generally works in the middle of the field. And I think if you are of the mindset that Travis Kelsey is what we saw last year, if you think that Travis Kelsey is potentially washed and not going to be that guy, then it really should open things up for Rashee Rice. I'm with you in that, like, look, I'm not necessarily in on that price tag personally. There's other players I prefer, but I see a world where Rashee Rice is top 12. Like there is a path for him to be top 12. My biggest concern really is, again, if Kelsey comes back ready to work, like, does he eat into those targets across the middle of the field? Because they work very similar in sync that way. So that's my biggest concern about Rashee Rice. But from a talent perspective, we saw him play, 4 games last year, and we saw that connection with him and Mahomes where, 9 targets, 6 targets, 14 targets against Atlanta, right? And I mean, he was on the field a very good amount. And I like Xavier Worthy. Don't get me wrong. I think he could be a talented player, but I don't fear that Worthy's going to see this massive target share. I think he's going to be an explosive or big play guy,
There we
right?
go.
And
There
they
we
need the
go.
explosives, right?
Yeah.
But if he can draw defenses downfield with his field stretching ability, same with Hollywood Brown, who can also do the same, you hope that that will open things up underneath, which teams have honestly with Kansas City played a lot of too high shells to cover up those deep balls. So if they're putting all that attention on those field stretchers, you would think it would help Rashee Rice work in the middle of the field, which again should be a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, really about that yards after catch for him. So that's the argument I could make for him being a top 12 player this year.
1000%. And the thing that I've gone to all off season is the Chiefs wanted to get back to the Legion of Zoom in 2024. Then Hollywood goes and breaks his collarbone early in the offseason. They're managing, they're not using Xavier Worthy in the field stretcher role. But then you saw in the Super Bowl, even though it's a blowout and people are going to say, well, what was the score when that happened? I don't care. It happened. So Xavier Worthy runs a post and it's a too high shell if I'm not mistaken, and he outruns the coverage and Mahomes launches it. And I don't know if there's just some sort of disconnect between what Mahomes is capable of and what he's just done for the last couple of years.
Sure.
But it's like people forgot that he could do that. Now they were bad on their deep connection early on, but don't you think that that's something that one of the best quarterbacks that's ever played the game and the fastest player that we've ever seen at the combine, don't you think that's something that they could figure out?
I would hope. I mean, if anybody can figure out, you gotta hope that it's Mahomes and Andy
Andy
Reid.
Reid, yeah,
Yeah.
Andy Reid, like that brain trust, they could very easily change philosophies if they need to score more points. It's just that their defense is so good that they don't have to put the game at risk. It's just, hey, just make a few plays here and there, stay ahead of the chains, keep our defense off the field, and then win the game.
Yeah.
But if they need to go back to scoring 30 to 35 points, Mahomes is one of the most talented arm talents we've ever seen. So why wouldn't we believe that he could support a Rashee Rice and he could support a Xavier Worthy in an explosive role? Rashee Rice operating in the Travis Kelsey underneath, creating after the catch, like what prime Travis Kelsey was, and then Xavier Worthy functioning kind of like Tyreek Hill, but more so like Deshaun Jackson, which those are both really big compliments. I just feel like it's setting ridiculous expectations if you expect Xavier Worthy to be Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, the only if I was going to poke a hole in the argument, my biggest concern is the run game for this team. Now that
Sure.
should afford more volume for Rashee Rice. This is more probably of an argument against Xavier Worthy, where I'm concerned about Isaiah Pacheco, right? If they did not really add to that room outside of Brashard Smith, who I know you're a big fan of, he helps
Yeah.
in the passing game, right? I don't know how involved he's going to get in early downs because they're going to probably give Pacheco and Kareem Hunt that opportunity to continue to keep that role, and then maybe Brashard Smith will get some chances if that doesn't pan out. If Pacheco is who we saw last year, but if defenses don't have to come up and they don't have to stack the box and they can play lighter and with more defenders, right? They'll be able to continue to limit those deep passes, and they may have to get creative and scheme up a lot of short passes to Rashee Rice. Maybe Xavier Worthy, they do scheme up short passes, but so I think that's probably more of an argument against Xavier Worthy than Rice, because I do think Rice is going to continue to work in the middle of the field and that short area. So it shouldn't be a concern if they're limiting the explosives, because Rice is going to be a guy that is not going to be these downfield explosive shots. Now, the last thing I'll say with Kansas City, they were ranked 26 in rushing yards per game last year, right? Is there a world where they do try to get back to the run game? Maybe they do try to establish that. And if that's the case, and Hollywood's healthy and Worthy's healthy, is there a world where they maybe don't throw the football nearly as much, because they did throw it a ton last year? It remains to be seen. And then the suspension, right? That's obviously the one thing we
Yeah.
haven't covered here. Do you think there's a possibility? I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. Is
Right.
there is
This
there
is
a
not
world though?
legal advice.
Yeah. Is there, but I mean, if you had to take a guess today, at this point, I don't think he's getting suspended. Now
Right.
it's early,
No.
but I don't know. I mean, we're seeing Jordan Addison, his
I mean,
trial date was recently, I think, and there's a possibility he gets suspended. And that was a whole year ago. So maybe there's a world, but I don't think he's going to get suspended at this point.
right. I don't so the thing with those that I try to pay attention to is like where the case has moved, or like are we having any movement from a legal standpoint? The
Yep.
NFL is perfectly happy to just let the whole legal process play out, when like as long as it wasn't like domestic violence or somebody, like they'll just let the legal process play out before taking action. And so, Alvin Kamara's thing went a whole year forward, and all that was adjudicated before he ever got suspended. From a dynasty perspective, I could care less about the suspension, but that's another reason. If you were worried about the suspension, that's more reason to be out on him at ADP, which again, I think I'd rather pick Josh Jacobs instead of Rashee Rice right there. Like if
Yeah.
we were later, then yeah, sure. But ifs and buts, candy and nuts. Like it just is what it is.
Well, look, there's no harm in saying you think a guy's going to break out, but also saying his price tag right now is a little too expensive. Both of those can be true, right? And I think that's totally fair. But let's go ahead and move on to the next player. It's going to be Cedric Tillman, who was my player that I picked. But I know you're just as high, if not higher, on Cedric Tillman. This is a guy
100.
right now, wide receiver 66, mid 13th round, an ADP of 153 currently in underdog best ball. And this is a talented receiver, Chev. I mean, this is not a guy who, was like a fifth round, sixth round player who just kind of bursted onto the scene a little bit last year. Cedric Tillman was a third round pick 2 years ago, right? He missed he missed time in some of those seasons the first 2 years, but also when you look at his 2024 season, the first 6 weeks of the year, just 10 routes per game, right? And he did not accumulate much from a fantasy perspective. Hell, no, probably more than half of the fantasy community outside of Devi guys and hardcore dynasty guys even really knew much about Cedric Tillman. But from week 7 to week 11, he bumped up to 45 routes per game from 10 to 45. And in that time, 10 targets, 6 catches, 75.5 yards per game, and gave us 18.6 points per game. Unfortunately, he suffered that injury in week 12 against the Steelers, got knocked out of the game, and did not return for the rest of the season. But, I mean, we saw when he was on the field, Stefanski, really Jameis loved him and utilized him a ton. We're all super high on Jerry Jeudy this year, or at least a lot of people are. But
Right.
Cedric Tillman is a much, much affordable cost and a guy that we've seen succeed when given that opportunity. The key thing to remember here is opportunity. 10 routes per game for the first 6 weeks of the year. When he was actually placed on the field more consistently, he produced. And there is not another guy in this offense at the wide receiver position, in my opinion, that is a threat to take away time from Cedric Tillman being on the football field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're preaching the gospel right now. Like that. I love the fact that people are just completely ignoring the fact that when he had an opportunity to be good at American tackle football, he was good at American tackle football. And I would argue dominant. I mean, he was a wide receiver one from through week 7 through 9. And I know that's a small sample size, but it happened. And when he was given the full-time role, and then he earned targets, and then unfortunately he got concussed and they just held him out for the rest of the year. And so now we're going into it and we have some uncertainty at quarterback. But at this price point, round 13, mid 13th round, I'm in. I am unequivocally in, just because of the fact that he's big, he's fast. We've seen him be good at football, and it's not going to hurt the construction of your team in best ball, especially to add a guy with this type of blow up potential. How much is wide receiver one for, like, getting the wide receiver one in your lineup, uh, you know, week over week over week? Like, how much is that worth in the 13th round? Or how many players have that potential in your opinion?
Oh, let's see. I got let me pull up Cedric Tillman. I was looking at his dynasty, just looking at where he's going in dynasty, but from
I mean,
a
he's free. He's free in Dynasty, right?
he
Like in
yeah,
startups.
he practically is free in dynasty. In best ball right now, you have Jalen McMillan, Romeo Dobbs, Adam Thielen, Pat Bryant, Wandale Robinson, Jalen Noel. Maybe I would say Jalen Noel because he plays behind Kirk, who's been injured. Noel, if he was given that role, he could, I think, give us
Yeah,
a couple spike weeks.
love that.
But you know, I actually kind of, and I don't want to change the topic here. I've said this. I actually happen to like Wandale Robinson. He's kind of going right behind him, and I'm not going to sit here and make this a Wandale Robinson segment, but there's a world where I would take Wandale, but I think Tillman provides much more ceiling. And honestly, wouldn't surprise me if Tillman has just as many targets as Wandale does this year. Who obviously Wandale had an amazing season from a target standpoint, but didn't really have much
Right.
yards or touchdowns, which was kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, this the Michael Pittman conundrum. It's like, man, you got 140 targets and you turn that into 900 yards.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So Cedric Tillman right now in dynasty startups, wide receiver 64, ranks 168 in terms of startup ADP. Guys going around him, Xavier Legette is going a full round ahead of him. Personally, for me, I would trade Xavier Legette for Tillman right now. I wouldn't need anything added on. Now, I try to get things added on, of course, in deals that I do, but Cedric goes 20 spots behind Tillman. So I'm not really high well, Cedric goes 20 spots behind Tillman. Cedric goes 20 hot spots behind Leggett.
Legit,
I'm
yes.
I'm I'm really not a big Leggett guy. I think I would be fine going from Leggett to Tillman. If you could get a third added on or a fourth added on, I'd be doing that. But another guy is Rashad Bateman, who goes a little bit before Cedric Tillman. Would you prefer who out of those three guys? Who would you prefer in Dynasty?
Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I was a big Nico guy before it was super cool. Hey, bud. Hey, Mike. Um, I I was a big Nico guy before it was cool to be a Nico guy. So like 2022, it's like, hey, the Texans got a dude, and I like all these traits, and I see him make these catches, and he moves different with the ball, but it just wasn't consistent.
Sure.
And I feel like Cedric Tillman has shown you. I'm not saying he's Nico, but he's that type of athlete. So people show you they're good at football. You're gonna hear me say it a lot. You show me you're good at football, I'm gonna believe you. I'm not gonna believe that you just stopped. The Monstars came down, stole your powers, and you can't football anymore. Like I'm going to believe you. So I would take Cedric Tillman because he has that type of upside. The other two guys, Xavier Legette, I was a big guy, Xavier Legette guy coming out in spite of the red flags about the breakout age and all that stuff. But for what I saw last year was just like, okay, you can't be an outside wide receiver and we need to manufacture you touches because you're not able to track the ball and catch it downfield. Now that may be something he could work on, but yeah, I don't have those concerns with Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And honestly, yeah, and I just think Tillman just feels more polished. The reception perception came out right on him. Like it looked really, really good. And Leggett does this weird thing, like I've noticed on film, where like Leggett like almost like jumps. You know, like some guys jump when they don't need to jump to go catch the
yes,
football. Like he does
yes,
that consistently, and it really, really bothers me. But
yes. That's the thing with him that I was most disappointed in is just how raw of a receiver he actually still is.
yeah,
Like I thought it was maybe like, okay, well, he's an athlete that that just is really good after the catch. But it's like, oh no, you're still kind of working through being a good receiver, like catching the ball. It's not natural. He's not like plucking it out of the air. He's like letting it hit him in the belly button and trap it or trapping it against his pads.
yeah.
So I'm just, yeah. Cedric, all that to say, Cedric Tillman, I'm I'm bullish on. I think that he's a steal where he's going right now.
Yeah, he's practically free. And in Dynasty, you could really you don't have to give up much. Now we're gonna go over two more players here because we do got to wrap this up. Two more guys. First guy, Josh Downs. He's your guy. He's also really my guy too, but you picked him before I got a chance to. Wide receiver 48 right now in underdog ADP, pick 87. He's going in the early to mid eighth round. Josh Downs, I mean, if we could get this guy some more consistent quarterback play, I don't know. I mean, Patrick Mahomes or, a good quarterback is not just going to spawn in Indianapolis and just be there all of a sudden that we're not thinking of. And maybe there's a trade or maybe there's an acquisition. It's going to be Anthony Richardson or it's going to be Daniel Jones, right? And try to talk to the people watching this, Chev, who have concerns about the quarterback play in Josh Downs and convince them that he is worth that eighth round ADP and why he's somebody that you think can have a breakout season.
So we saw a worst case scenario where we were dealing with all of Anthony Richardson's deficiencies, and we got some Joe Flacco in there, but all that being said, he was still. I mean, the the logical steps forward he's taken with subpar environments. He was at 7.4 targets a game, 24% target share, point 0.3 targets per route run, and I like 78 catchable targets, 72 receptions. He's still productive, even though it's a terrible environment. And it's because he's really good at football.
Yeah.
And I think that there's someone, even though like we all see Michael, I don't know, I won't speak for you, but we all saw Michael Pittman as the alpha in that offense. But I think there was a quiet shift last year, but no one really cared because Anthony Richardson was only completing 10 passes a game. I think that he can take at least a small step forward to be able to deliver the ball in short space to Josh Downs, and I think where he's going in the eighth round, I'll take that shot because he's going to maximize every single touch. And if the quarterback play even gets better by any stretch of the imagination, whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, you're getting a guy who could be very, very firmly in the top 24 at wide receiver 48.
Yeah, and I think there's I mean, this is a guy that has upside, right? Like he doesn't have to be a manufactured touch kind of guy, right? Like his route refinement is there. This is a guy who was number 6 in target rate last year, 29.6%. I think that speaks volumes. Everybody was nervous about who the quarterback was, if it was Joe Flacco, if it was Anthony Richardson, who Joe Flacco, we just talked about Tillman, right? I think
Yeah.
Flacco has a chance to start week 1, and we saw what he's been able to help do for these wide receivers in fantasy. When you think about Josh Downs, though, there was a point last year, week 9, week 10, week 11, 12, 14.2, 19.4 fantasy points. And this is a guy that did produce big weeks. I mean, 22 points, 19.5 points, 22 points again, and 19.4. He had 4 weeks last year where he scored 19 or more fantasy points. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's not even including week 18 where that's not considered that's like nobody plays that week. He also
Sure.
scored 19 fantasy points that week too. So
Mhm.
I mean, so I think about Downs, right? I mean, I think this offense really likes him. My biggest concern with him is, can he get on the field in 2 wide receiver sets? Is it going to be Alec Pearson, Michael Pittman, right? That's my biggest concern because they like Mo Alley Cox. So I think there's a chance there's going to run those two tight end sets, right? They're going to run it with Mo Alley Cox and Tyler Warren, right? And then maybe Tyler Warren does eat into a little bit of that middle of the field play where they used Josh Downs a decent amount last year. That's my biggest concern. But I'm like you, like I'm a big Josh Downs believer. It's just about opportunity for him. But again, I mean, it's undeniable that this guy had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games last year in the 17. Well, he didn't even play 17. I'm sorry, but he had 8 games last year where he scored 12 or more fantasy points. He didn't play week 1. He didn't play week 2. This is a guy that also had the ankle injury. So he
Yeah.
didn't even start off slow when he came back. He had a week, the first week back, 5 points. Then he went 22, 15.9, and 19.5, all after a high ankle sprain, right? Like there was concern, like, would he start off slow? Right. And so I think it's wheels up for Downs. I love the cost on him. I'm trying to acquire him everywhere, but I already have Josh Downs in almost all of my dynasty leagues. But I'm super high on Downs. I think he's really
Yeah.
really going to have a solid year. And to your point, we saw him at the worst quarterback play he's probably going to have.
Yeah. It's like, man, it's like careful what you wish for if you think the Colts quarterback play can't get any worse. But
No.
also, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to imagine it being worse. And you've seen him give you reliable fantasy performances. And I think that he could take a step forward. I mean, 13 points a game to 17, 16, like just reliable quarterback play. He's that type of talent. So, like, again, they show you they're good, believe them.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thing too. But we're just gonna close out with Downs. We had 2 other guys. Maybe I'll put that into a separate video. We can do that later. But just to close out on Downs, I do want to talk about just like where he's going currently. Josh Downs right now. I think. Let me take a look really quick. I think he's somewhere around here. Hold on. Sorry, this is a little more
You good?
impromptu
So I
with
got it.
Downs
I
here.
got it. So right before him, we got TJ Hawkinson. Then Brian Robinson goes right after him, Cooper Cup, Baker Mayfield, Amika Buka, and Michael Pittman Jr. So would you rather? I'll do this one for you. Would you rather Amika Buka or Josh Downs?
I would rather Downs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like we're strong on the downside over here. Like I think we're both high on Amika Buka from a dynasty perspective, but I think that what Josh Downs could do with just league average quarterback play is going to smash that ADP.
Yeah, and I'm with you too. I don't even like a Cooper Cup. I think could be better than people are giving credit to, but I'm not expecting much from Cup. Honestly, I would take Downs possibly over Brandon Ayuk too, who I know people keep saying is a really good value, but again. we're talking about a guy who might start the year on the pup list. I kind of like Darnell Mooney, who goes one spot ahead of him. He's kind of sneaky.
Yeah,
Um,
it's real. It's real. I like Darnell Mooney as well.
yeah. But that's going to do it for us. Chev, thank you so much for joining us. Before we hop off, remind the people where they can find you and if you're working on anything specific right now.
So, if you're into like making your own rankings for the upcoming season, you can download the League Champ app. We're gonna make it super easy, just kind of a this or that, and it'll spit out rankings that you can customize. That's available in the Play Store and the Apple App Store, whatever it is. I have an Android, so I'm not familiar with the Apple stuff. So there we go. And if you want to follow anything else that I'm doing, just follow me on Twitter at Chev90. There's a link tree with everything that I'm working on over there.
Cool. Well, Chev, we'll get you back on the podcast another time. Appreciate you coming out. And
Appreciate you having me.
yeah, of course, man. We'll get you back on again, and we'll see you guys next time.